Are you wondering if screen time causes virtual autism, or are you familiar with the term virtual autism? I've been hearing more and more about virtual autism, and today I'm going to explain what it is and discuss my views on screen time for children with autism and toddlers showing signs. So let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of Autism and Speech Delays Made Easy. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Barbera. Just yesterday, I was on a high-touch coaching call with a couple who decided that they thought their toddler was showing signs of autism due to virtual autism, and they cut out daily screen time 8 months ago because of their concerns. Their young son was very obsessed with TV, especially shows like Miss Rachel. And during Miss Rachel episodes, he would get very overexcited, and they said he would flap his hands. So normally I don't look at videos and, we don't give any kind of feedback with our participants in our online course and community. But with high touch coaching participants, we do look at videos. And this child, even though he had 8 months of no daily screen time, is still making very little sounds. I did not hear any word approximations or words during the 10 or 15 minutes of videos that I watched yesterday. So even though screen time has been cut out, the language of this little boy, who's now a little bit over 3 years of age, is not really improving much. So let's talk about virtual autism, because this couple really had a lot of questions about my views on it. And I did some research today and wanted just to get the information out there. I mean, I have a lot of experience, over 25 years in the autism world. First, as a confused parent with a child, my son Lucas, who just turned 28 years of age. He was very obsessed with TV and very much enjoyed TV, especially Barney and Wiggles and all those kind of shows. And so we're going to talk about Lucas, but let's talk about virtual autism. It is not an officially recognized medical condition, but virtual autism, according to my research today, refers to autism-like symptoms in young children that arise from excessive screen time. Some people believe that, unlike traditional autism spectrum disorder or ASD, these symptoms of virtual autism are primarily linked to prolonged exposure to digital devices before the age of 3 and are often can be mitigated by reducing screen time. In fact, one of the sources on the internet basically said you can reverse virtual autism by getting rid of screen time. Now, I do believe that kids on the spectrum, especially, but all kids are very much more addicted to electronics and screen time than at any point in our history. But there also is a lot of parent blaming for, guilting parents. And I believe that, one of my questions is, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Kids with autism do enjoy structure. They, my son Lucas, for instance, when he was very little, he really liked Barney, and he really liked the same episodes of Barney over and over again. because I think it provided structure, and for him, it was like he didn't have a lot of self-stimulatory behavior, rocking or lining things up or whatever. For him, he was basically stimming on the TV. And he would really like to see, this is the part. I mean, he's probably thinking, he had very little language at the time. This is the part where Baby Bop comes around the sofa, or this is the part where I get excited because they, play patty cake or whatever they were doing. But he really would be very content, very calm, very happy if the TV, and especially the VHS tapes of very familiar recordings, were played for him. So I remember my husband is a physician, and I'm a nurse and a behavior analyst. But at the time, I wasn't a behavior analyst. I had no idea what ABA was. And when Lucas started showing signs of autism, and the term virtual autism, according to my little bit of research today, has been around since, at least 2012. I mean, this is back in the late 1990s. There was no coined term of virtual autism. But my husband, who's a physician, believed that maybe Lucas was watching too much TV and we should stop that. And then maybe he would get better. So I do believe that we approached the behavior specialist when she started ABA for Lucas. And one of our first questions was, my husband thinks we should turn off the TV. He, he thinks that would help. And her response was interesting. She said, we don't, basically these are his leisure skills. This is the way he's stimming. He is calm. He is happy. And it depends, it's just kind of like emptying the water basin before you have new water to fill it up. Is if you get rid of his favorite leisure activity now and dump out the water and stop all TV, what is Lucas going to do? Is he going to climb on furniture? Is he going to mouth things, which he had a problem with mouthing and chewing? Is he going to mouth dangerous things? Is he going to take a can of soda and dump it out on the family room floor and make a mess of things? Is he going to start rocking or banging his head to provide stimulation? And so her guidance was like, we'll work on fading that out, but let's build some skills first. Let's build some responding. Let's build some really good engagement and leisure skills before we dump out the water. And I told this family that I was coaching yesterday when they were asking about screen time and virtual autism, is my question is, if you take away the electronics, what are they doing? Because like my former client, Jack, for instance, his leisure skill, which wasn't screen time, it was taking plastic bottles and putting straws in them repetitively. Or some kids build the same block pattern over and over again. That's not really stimulation it's somewhat stimulating for the brain, but to me, I'd rather have them engaged in songs and, Miss Rachel's kind of activities than sitting with a straw repetitively. So whatever they're doing during their downtime, during their awake time, kids in general, not just kids on the spectrum, but kids in general, 2- and 3-year-olds and 18-month-olds and 1-year-olds, they need to be engaged during most of their waking hours, which might be 80 to 100 hours a week. So even if they go to daycare, or if they don't go to daycare or preschool or whatever, it's a lot of time to engage. And so if they are engaging in typical play, typical 2-year-old kind of things, that's great. But are they even safe without, with you leaving the room without watching an electronic? So I do believe that kids on the spectrum, or kids that are going to be diagnosed, might be are probably watching videos in a different way. In fact, Dr. Ame Klin, who I talk about in my book, Turn Autism Around, I saw him speak a couple times at the National Autism Conference. And I did a podcast on Ame Klin's work. The title of that podcast is Can Autism Be Prevented? It is podcast number 268. We can link it in the show notes. But Dr. Ame Klin, he's one of the international researchers on autism. He's very well regarded. He's done a lot of work of sitting babies, like sibling babies and twins, in car seat type devices, watching videos, and where these babies don't have a diagnosis. Infants and toddlers don't have a diagnosis yet, or I guess some of them do, but it's this very standardized, almost like an MRI machine, but it's basically a car seat and an electronic, and they show them videos and they track their eye gaze. And so typically developing babies, infants, and toddlers will say, he uses the example, and this is all outlined in podcast 268, but I'll just quickly tell you all about it. But there's a scene where it's a plastic wagon with a little door and 2 toddlers sitting in the door. And they're not talking to each other, but they're fighting over whether the door should be open or closed. They're just their eye gaze towards each other, and the one's opening and the one's closing, and they're getting mad at each other. Where a typical baby, infant, or toddler will be looking at their faces of the 2 kids in the wagon, where a baby or a toddler who is going to go on to get a diagnosis of autism is staring at the repetitiveness of the door opening and closing. They're missing the whole scene. They're missing the social language in the scene, even when there's no talking. So I do believe that kids on the spectrum, or that will get diagnosed, are actually more interested in watching electronics, more interested in videos and so forth that are repetitive, but they are also looking kind of at the wrong things. So what to do? Well, one of the things that doesn't help is the fact that with COVID, everything was shut down. Families were working from home. It was a necessity to have a lot more screen time than is recommended. And we're going to talk about the recommendations of screen time from the American Academy of Pediatrics. But a lot of kids were using a lot of electronics so that their parents could basically survive during COVID, and that has increased screen time. So in chapter 9 of my book, Turn Autism Around, I talk about this little boy, Drew. I worked with his 8 or 10-year-old brother for years, and the family called me as I was writing my book, and they were worried about their infant son who had turned 3 during COVID, and he had not gone to daycare for about 4 or 5 months. Then he turned 3. Then all of a sudden, the parents were panicking about little Drew because he wasn't potty trained. He looked like he might have some symptoms of autism. And so I went over with my stat bag screening tool for autism in toddlers, and I attempted to do a stat assessment with him. I am trained and certified in that. And what I found was he was very interested in cars and trains and had a lot of problem behaviors, but the parents were reinforcing those problem behaviors. And I talk about this in chapter 9. And you can get the first 2 chapters for free and all the book resources. We'll link that in the show notes. So you can start reading. But chapter 9 is on advanced talking. And this little boy, Drew, did have advanced talking. He's like, "Hi, Miss Mary." And then he was trying to get our attention by throwing things, like throwing piano books off the piano. And so he did have a lot of social awareness and social skills. And what it came down to, in my opinion, was he wasn't in daycare. There was no structure. He had an older 10-year-old brother with moderate to severe autism. The parents were trying to work from home, and Drew was not getting the structure he needed. He was getting way too much iPad time, and he needed to get back to structure. I don't believe Drew had signs of autism, although people who believe in virtual autism say basically it's, this different from regular ASD, and they believe that virtual autism is a temporary condition that can be reversed. And, basically by limiting or taking away screen time. So in general, I think I don't really think that there's a differentiation between virtual autism and ASD. I believe that any child who is not engaged during most of their waking hours can become withdrawn, can have hyperactivity, can have problem behaviors that can be shaped up further to be more problem behaviors. It can look like autism, kids that are abused and neglected, not that saying anything about screen time is abuse or neglect, but kids from impoverished homes who don't have enough engagement can look autistic and they're not. Kids with hearing loss can look autistic and they're not. I'm not saying that. I guess there might be kids that have excessive screen time that could have some symptoms of autism, but we have to look at the whole child, whether you have autism in your family and siblings, or whether you're worried about autism or not. Kids really need engagement outside of screen time. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry have slightly different recommendations for screen time, but they both recommend that before 18 months of age, that we should limit screen time other than video chatting. So when a parent's out of town, for instance, ages 18 to 24 months, screen time should be limited to watching educational programs and watching it together with the parent. From ages 2 to 5, limiting screen time use to 1 hour per day of high quality programs. Again, if we can have real people, real adults, real kids talking in a slow animated way with music, imitation, those are all better than watching cartoon characters where you're not going to be seeing facial expressions or real actions. And the more the parent can be involved in parent-child interaction during screen time, the better as well. So in general, some things you can do, and we will link the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines for screen time. We can also link the American Academy of Pediatrics has a family media plan that you can download for free. But in general, some things to do for all kids, whether you're worried about autism, have autism in your life, or are worried about screen time, is have some limits. When they do use screen time, make sure you're as involved as possible. Try to have them tune into things that are educational, that are age appropriate. Also have a daily schedule of indoor and outdoor activities. Really important for kids to stay physically active as well. make sure you are chunking things so that, harder tasks follow with easier tasks throughout the day so that the child remains happy and engaged throughout the day. If you can't engage your child at home or get a babysitter to, help engage them, or you might consider sending them to daycare or having preschool, or getting them evaluated for autism so you can have therapists either come into your home or they can go to potentially an ABA clinic or some other type of therapy. But you can't afford to work for 3 hours while your young child is on screen for 3 hours so that you can concentrate and they are entertained, because that entertainment can really do harm to their brain and their interactions. So we really need to limit things and to get engagement for the child, no matter if they have autism or not. And in general, like I said before, encourage videos with real people, real kids, and have as much engagement during that screen time as possible. So I hope you got a little insight on virtual autism. We'll link a couple articles about virtual autism in the show notes, as well as the podcast on the work of OmniClin and the AAP's media guide for families. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, I would love it if you would share it with others, leave me a comment, give a review, and I'll see you right here next time, same place. Have a good one.